the 5th day of September 2022. Welcome to the Twilight Zone. We'll be talking about nuclear, obviously. And I hope everybody's had a great day, if that's possible. We got great show for everybody tonight. We got protesters marching to the beat of their own drums in Ontario, Canada. It's their third year protesting. These are passive protesters, unlike the rowdies you're listening to. They both are wonderful. I just love and adore people like them that get out there and protest each year. Despite the fact that nuclear is a scary topic for most people, they went down the rabbit hole and realized you got to have a conversation. And they started their protest, which is the Nuclear Waste Management Organization Canada, is actually the industry. It's the absolute wrong way to deal with the nuclear waste. 18 years after getting $28 billion, they are still several decades away from starting to move the stuff out of the environment. The problem with waste is splitting the atom into the environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at a rate that the average person, it's a very difficult subject. The scumbag here, rich man, mouthpiece, who takes great joy in destroying the most impoverished and the creatures on the planet by promoting nuclear. We got a little video clip for you. This is March the 14th. This is the day that Reactor 3 blew up in Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan. And I was listening to it several nights now. I've been using it as my lullabies. It's hard to sleep when these monsters exist, but it's the norm in this.
I don't think you have any evidence of radiation exposure for those people. Of course, we are looking into the conditions of those people, 11 injuries.
So they're talking about Reactor 3 has blown up, but they say there is no radiation injuries. He's very adamant about it.
But as far as we understand, this is as a result of blast that took place early this morning. And
now the blast was felt 25 miles away. 25 miles away. So imagine if you live within 5 or 10 miles. 5 or 10 miles of the explosion. Imagine how bad it would feel. These buildings you see there, rectangular buildings, are 190 feet tall. That was one of them. You can see the fuel pool in the reactor core falling back down to the earth. It happened to be the mixed oxide fuel. Now, what they're saying is that the people right alongside of this detonation that was felt 25 miles away never suffered radiation exposure. It's like somebody with the name on their shirt, and you say, they introduced themselves as somebody else, and you say, well, but what's the name on your shirt? Well, that's me. But I'm so-and-so. But that's not the same name as on your shirt. Yeah, but what's on the shirt is me. And they just keep doing that for 2 hours straight. That's what it is. Listen to that. Oh, and Helen Caldicott had wrote 14 books on anti-nuclear and also has championed and started up multiple organizations of physicians for social responsibilities worldwide with around 29,000 members. Is going to try to convince, and we've seen her do this hundreds of times in interviews, try to convince the people that are listening that the building is actually intact and doesn't actually look like the building to her left.
And especially Building 3 is very fragile. It's still got a huge cooling pool on its roof, protected by nothing. The molten core has melted its way down onto the concrete of the containment vessel, but maybe into the earth. And if that collapsed, there would be a nuclear inferno.
Now, so that's the building. Does it look like the reactor core melted down into the building? Does it look like the fuel pool is still on top of the building? Remember, they felt the explosion 25 miles away, Helen?
We would continue to follow possible implications, but we have not found any evidence of radiation exposures as a result of explosion that took place for the unit number 3 this morning.
So this was a 190-foot tall, 150-foot wide nuclear reactor building with a 720-ton reactor core versus Chernobyl 200 tons. And with the two fuel pools, you can see the depictions at the top of the building, the depiction to the right. We're at the top of the building, along with the reactor core. They're gone. And those fuel pools, because you don't have a repository in Japan, has close to 4 decades of reactor cores gathered up. Chernobyl was brutal, by the way. Let me explain Chernobyl. And so we're going to explain Chernobyl so that you can understand why, if you're not familiar with this subject, of course, why I'm asking in the poll, should evil, deadly chemotherapy be banned from hospitals and use worldwide? And when it comes to uses, past, like the hospital is insidious evil, but when it comes to uses, huge concern, of course, is the animals that are being slaughtered worldwide with radiation. They've never cured an animal. Okay. So when he says he doesn't know of anybody being contaminated, there's the military unit that was at Reactor 3 was severely contaminated from Unit 1 and Unit 2 detonating. And then when Reactor 3, there was no one there because of the other 2 detonations, he sent in the military. The military went in, and Reactor 3 blew up. And then the next day, Reactor 4 blew up. But Reactor 3 blew up a couple of times. These are powerful explosions. They couldn't even stand next to each other. They were that radioactive. But what was interesting is they were giving this press conference in Japan. These are the officials, the non-regulatory agencies, the government, the ministries that are involved in the industry doing a press conference. It was off-limit to Western media for the most part. But Reactor 3 which was a mixed oxide fuel facility, had just detonated. And it was incredible meltdowns going on, and they're claiming there's absolutely nothing going on. Everything is perfect. That is some twisted stuff. And so they can't tell the truth after telling these kind of lies. And so here we are 11 years later. There's no incentive for them to tell the truth on top of that. And they're not doing anybody a favor, just the nuclear industry. They're not doing their country a favor. This is sedition. This is absolutely criminal what they're doing. And to claim there was no adverse side effects from enormous losses is surreal. It's just surreal. I mean, this is a 20-day model of the radioactive fallout on planet Earth. It doesn't stop there. This is just the first 20 days. This is a conservative model, by the way. It's an invisible plume. From the ocean floors to every speck of land within 40 days. Now, Chernobyl was a much smaller reactor, but it was a serious accident. And I need to explain Chernobyl graphically in order to explain why I'm asking, should evil, deadly chemotherapy be banned from hospitals in use worldwide? So this will make sense once we shoot through this. This is a model of the Chernobyl radioactive fallout. Chernobyl was a 200-ton reactor. It was mostly graphite, and it's still lethal, and will be for tens of thousands of years, the radioactive fallout. But this particular plume model is not really an accurate model. It's certainly worse than this. This was based on just a tiny release, by the way. This wasn't based on the inventory, the actual inventories. I got that at. So you can start seeing radiation starting to cover the planet, because in this model, the planet is just a flat piece of... Okay, and so there was the official story, according to this kooky, disgusting organization known as United Nations, like the IPCC, UNSCLEAR, ERPA, IAEA, are all these subsidies of this bizarre, disgusting corporation known as UN. George Bush calls them the New World Order. And they're quoted worldwide. They claim around 36 people died. There's over 600 helicopter pilots died, for starters.
It was heroism.
During this operation, 600 pilots are fatally contaminated with radiation. All of them will die. But their efforts only buy a few days. Although it has been covered over.
And this is why they never sent in the helicopters to Fukushima, just the one run. It was more about getting that original footage for them. They would have gladly sacrificed 600 helicopter pilots. Just under 3% of the children exposed to the radiation from Chernobyl in the womb were diagnosed as healthy at the age of 7. There's over 3 million children with permanent disabilities, because radiation illness is a permanent illness. It sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones the anthropogenic man-made radiation, and it pulses energy every second for the rest of your life. Your body attacks it with white blood cells for the rest of your life. Like, so when you get a cut on your finger, white blood cells from all the joints, not just your spleen, but all your joints, will attack it. And 6 or 7 days later, it's healed. But in order for that to happen, your red blood count goes down, which carries oxygen nutrition. Your white blood count goes up. Every white blood cell displaces a red blood cell. But with radiation, it's permanent. Your body attacks it for the rest of your life. But it's pulsing energy, destroying chromosomes and DNA and cells. So your body also has to flood these areas that are being bombarded with gammas, X-rays, neutrons, betas, alphas, emissions. Okay, so far so good. Don't worry, I'll tell you another 500 times for the years there. Chernobyl fallout and prenatal mortality in England and Wales. That's 3,000 miles away, Dana. They actually closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland, United Kingdom, after Chernobyl, which is nowhere near Fukushima, but obviously it's incredible. Which meant you were supposed to not drink the water anywhere in those countries, or in countries in between that Chernobyl, which is Europe. Okay, and the reason is because just a tiny amount will make you sick. This is why they closed 9,000 farms. 400 are still closed today. They should have never opened any of them. Everything is tested, even today, by the way, of the 9,000 farms before you can sell it. Down syndrome time clustering in 1987 in Belarus. It's a 2007 study. So what are you looking at that for? Because I thought it was only cancer, Dana. Oh, you didn't know? Down syndrome in Scotland. There was evidence of an increase in 1987 also. Right? So it wasn't just Belarus, which is right alongside, which is significant on its own. We're also talking Scotland. Okay. And, of course, 9,000 farms in England, Scotland, United Kingdom. So you contaminated everything, all the communities, all the drinking water, all the pastures, all the farms, all the natural fruit, all the natural berries, all the natural flowers. Oh, that's why we're seeing the bees disappear, is it, Dana? That's right. Because they bring the radioactive honey back to their nest. Schizophrenia from Chernobyl. Schizophrenia. Because your immune system is destroyed, your parents, right? And then you're born. Dental abnormalities in people living in radionuclide contaminated regions. And when you think about what United Kingdom covered up the wind scale meltdown and contamination, and so you can directly correlate the bad teeth in the United Kingdom to Sellafield in 57. Because they never stopped giving. There's still 8 million liters a day going into the Atlantic Ocean. Their whole coastline on top of that is polluted. And these people back in the day ate a lot of seafood. Abnormal or congenital eye defects is another radiation illness we don't talk about enough. Infant mortality after Chernobyl. Effects of radiation on the reproductive system. This is not just humans. What we're going to see is applicable. Now we've got to go through all of this so you can appreciate how bad going into the hospital and actually getting injected with chemo could be. So this is fallout. Imagine actually going in and getting injected. Effects of radiation in the reproductive system. Pregnancy outcome in Norway after Chernobyl. But Norway is a long way from the Chernobyl reactors. Dana, that's right. Early infant mortality in Germany before and after Chernobyl. Radioactive fallout, neural tube defects. So imagine in the animal kingdom where you can't correct any of this. They don't have surgeons or healthcare. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden after Chernobyl. Chernobyl atomic energy plants on the outcome of pregnancy. Prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses in the Czech Republic. Birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. Abortions in Sweden. Abortions in Denmark. Pregnancy outcome in Sweden. All of this after Chernobyl. Secondary sex ratio. So these are studies, just normal reactors are hemorrhaging radiation. And so this is the proof of it, because there's a discrepancy in males to female ratios in an area of a nuclear power plant. And what that translates into, there's more males than females being born. But the only way you can have that statistic symmetrically throughout that area is if everybody was being poisoned all the time. And so that has to be true for the animal, insect, birds, and species worldwide and that are in the environment. So think about dumping for 30 years in the oceans. They understood what they were doing, folks. They weren't naive. Look, go back 400 years. Get on, I shouldn't say Google because they're so evil, but get on a search engine and go to images and look at 400-year-old houses. They're the most beautiful houses you might ever see, by the way. There's just stunning amount of detail, too. Stunning glass, just beautiful kitchens. You'd be proud to own one today. And so, even 400 years ago, for instance, that's proof that humans were extremely articulate and talented. Okay, let's keep going. So trends in human sex odds at birth in Europe after Chernobyl nuclear accident. So the suggestion is that Chernobyl impacted the entire population to the point where you had more males than females being born, which was a signature of radiation poisoning. So if you're studying the test area, you would study the species. You would start studying it that way also. Non-thyroid cancers. Again, right? Just that connotation of non-thyroid cancers, because man-made anthropogenic radiation can give it the entire host, the entire litany of cancers. There's not just thyroid, despite that's propaganda, see? And so when they framed it that way, there's also 1,800 other illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. Followed from Chernobyl and overall cancer incidents in Finland. But they should have been looking for heart problem spikes, liver, lung, respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline. Decades later, they should be looking at Alzheimer's, dementia, diabetes. Congenital abnormality registry in Belarus is just frightening. Orphanages after orphanages of disfigured children from Fukushima. Non-thyroid cancers. Again, ignoring, if you're checking for cancers, you might as well check for the other host too, right? Of illnesses. Well, because once you start putting that together, and I'll show you what I mean coming up actually, chromosome aberration, Norwegian reindeer. So do you think it's just going to be the reindeer? How about the foxes and the ptarmigan and the owls and the minks and the muskrats and the insects and everything else? You can't, if you're having it in one species, it has to be affecting all the other species. They're hard cases, is all I can say. Lifetime effective doses to hunters and their families in the 3 most contaminated counties in Sweden after Chernobyl. Difference in effective radiation, abundance of animals in Chernobyl and Fukushima. Ionizing radiation, human gender proportion at birth. Again, you see these connotations of more males than females, which is less population for all species, right? So in increments over many decades, this could have a devastating effect, obviously. Delayed effects of accidental radiation exposure 15 years after Chernobyl. Delayed effects. Right, like heart problems, liver, lung, respiratory, and there's 1,800 of them. Trends in birth and birth-sex ratio in the vicinity of the research reactors. Why are they looking at that? Because even these low-powered research reactors are going to poison everybody within so many square kilometers. Say 15 or 20. And they're able to show it by gender studies. Human sex ratio at birth and residential proximities to nuclear facilities in France. This is incredible stuff. More males than females. Population exposures to 131 releases from Hanford. They used to get volunteers to sit in the farmer's field because they love farms. Lord knows they love farms. Used to get people to sit in the farmer's field when they were going to have controlled releases, and then would study them. And if they died, they would ash them, like they did at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They would ship highly radioactive victims to the United States. They would ash their bodies, incinerate their bodies, sniff the ashes for the isotopes. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Japanese were shipped. What Hanford's doing and done and continue to do, it's a 700, they want another 700 billion to try to clean it up. 700 billion to clean up a single site. You got any idea how many of these sites they actually got? Global implication of Chernobyl global. We're almost through this part. Potential for disease initiation by inhaled beta-emitting nuclear particles. So all of this they're talking about is very low doses, by the way. Very low doses. So going to a hospital and having some maniac inject it into you. Sometimes they'll inject it accidentally into your flesh. That's considered an accident. Like the room you're going to be in is what's known as $1 million lead room. Everything is lead. Even the blankets to protect the nurses when they're coming and going from you. The lead room is to protect the visitors out in the hallway and other people. Your excrements is contained in a special system which is transferred to contamination sites. But it's going to fix you. Such a great lie. Brilliant, really. It'll fix you, though. It's dangerous to everybody but you. How about that? Do you believe that, or are you gullible enough to believe that? Leukemia incidences just after iodine-131 exposure. Leukemia, which is your body's flooded with white blood cells because you got so much radiation sequestered in your body. Prenatal irradiation. Prenatal. Induced brain and cognitive impairment. Prenatal. Get you before you're even born. Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. What do you think they're suggesting by that? That radioactive fallout poisoned every human on the planet to the point where a study could show there's a discrepancy. And they're right. And sadly and horrifically, they're actually right. But that you can't do that without doing that to all the species worldwide. So everybody was already poisoned multiple times during all the nuclear wars, which you call nuclear testing for some reason. The biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rods is not iodine, it's curium. They're all still bad, but the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod is the curium isotope. Curium isotope kills all the animals in all the experiments. Who knows what I got in there anyway. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Now, why would you suggest that? The very reason that weapons testing can change the sex ratio of males and females worldwide, because that's what plumes do. They cover the world, Dana. Oh, okay, that's right. I forgot that. This is France's model of 16 days of radioactive fallout. Now, it's only based on venting. It's not based on the entire inventory. Okay. So that would have the implications of all of this, right? This is fallout, radioactive fallout I just showed you. Something else, isn't it? Isn't that something? What I'm going to show you next is from injecting it into you or using the beam. And then I'm going to bring it all together and get on with the news cycle for tonight. Because I can come in here and do the news cycle. Bang, boom, pow. Have a nice day. See you later, everybody. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Or I can work myself silly and just load up on the documentation In case you want to beat him in court someday, I already got you halfway there. Just bear with me. I forgot one important piece of the puzzle. The puzzle. Oh, there she goes. Yee doggy. Here we go. Okay, so introduction to radiation injury at hospitals. So we got a poll tonight. Now, everything I just showed you was to get you ready so you can appreciate why I have now that poll. Should evil, deadly chemotherapy be banned from hospitals and use worldwide? So I showed you how gnarly the radioactive fallout is to all species, not just humans, right? So if you go in a hospital and you get radiation therapy, that's what they were laughing like when they came up with the word therapy with radiation. Let's call it radiation therapy. Let's go get some sake. Celebrate. Woohoo. We'll kill them with radiation therapy. They'll never know what hit them. Away we go. Introduction to radiation injury. Another silent epidemic. Acute radiation injuries. Radiation-induced injuries to your eyeballs from radiation therapy, by the way. Injuries to your heart from radiation therapy. And particularly dangerous for patients before the age of 21. Big surprise, developing children are more susceptible to radiation than full-grown adults. Wow, never would have jumped that one up. Cardiac injury following treatment for breast cancer. They radiate your breasts, and your heart, and your lungs, and your livers, and your kidneys. Hypoxia from all the white blood cells displacing all the red blood cells to carry oxygen. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system. That's permanent. Ain't getting no. They're probably, and all of this they're going to try to cure you with radiation, by the way. That should frighten you. Radiation-induced bowel injuries. Come on back down to the radiation. We'll fix you. Sorry about that. Laser treatment of severe radiation injuries to the lower intestinal, all of your intestine tracts. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Yay. Radiation injuries to the head and neck from chemotherapy. The assessments of radiation-induced brain injuries. Brain narcosis. I get indignant whenever I'm looking at this material. And try not to let it come out of me when we're talking about it. But it sometimes, because when you listen to the victims of what this done to them, we had to sign a piece of paper saying they can stick a stick up my butt. I still couldn't sue them. And then they'll give me this chemotherapy because they said there's nothing else they can do. Radiation injuries to your heart valves, to your rectal, radiation-induced rectal injuries. You can get all of these from just chemotherapy. Not just one of them, but all of them. Radiation-induced liver diseases. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. Language decline after brain radiation. And they call it therapy. It freaks me out every time I see the word. Reoccurrent brain tumors from radiation injuries. And for elderly people, aging mass detection of radiation-induced brain injuries, because a lot of it's latent, doesn't show up for a few years. Late radiation rectal injuries. There's another one that might show up 5-10 years down the road. A lot of these might not show up for 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. They might show up the next day. Impaired wound, but they will show up. Impaired wound healing after radiation therapy. So you don't heal up very well. Radiation-induced death. Late radiation injuries after radiotherapy of the breast cancer patients. There's over 12 million women had their breast removed because they allegedly had cancer, but it turned out they didn't. In North America in a 10-year period or something. Maniacs, man. Radiation injury to the growth plate. Radiation-induced cognitive impairment. You kind of get the idea where I'm going with this, don't you? Radiation-induced insufficiency fracture of the femurs 18 years after radiation therapy. It came back to haunt you. And so this is why I'm suggesting, I'm providing documentation. So I showed you how brutal the radioactive fallout is. That's just a fraction, by the way, of a fraction of a percent of what I could show you. Should the evil, deadly chemotherapy, I know I kind of skewed the poll by putting those little words there, evil and deadly. Chemotherapy be banned from hospitals in use worldwide. 3% of the people. Okay. So Dana, what about x-rays? Well, hang on, I'm getting to that. Don't be so friggin' pushy all the time. Just kidding, yeah. Where am I? I can't see me. There. So if you're going to get an x-ray or a CAT scan imaging, they're going to want to use a lead vest, so to speak, right? A lead blanket sometimes, whatever the case may be, to shield you from the radiation. Turns out that's... So first off, x-rays and CAT scans are a series, a brutal dose of radiation. You can do the same thing with high-powered lights and computer software and get a better image by far and a more accurate image. But the industry is not going to let go of this genocide machine. Lead aprons offer little protection. So much scarier than that. The x-ray machine calculates the dose. So when you put a lead apron, that's the gallows laugh. When you put a lead apron on your child, for instance, and stick them in these machines, the x-ray machine has to go into supernova mode to shoot through the lead apron. Because that's how it actually works. So they're recommending you'd stop using it, but they can't get people to stop using it because the industry is not going to tell them. Another concern is most imaging machines use the radiation automatically. So if the machine senses the shield, it increases the dose. So the average child is getting x-rays and they're using these things on them. And another concern is that most imaging machines, not most, they all do, the apron over part of your body is protected from radiation. It's an outdated practice, says the American Association of Physicists in Medicine. No longer support genocide shielding the reproductive organs in fetuses. And changing the practice has been a near impossible feat. So everybody is getting brutalized by these machines for 50 or 60 years, folks. It's despicable, really, because they know better. It might even have a negative consequence. Not might, how can it not? You're going to increase the shield, the dose on the patient by many folds. to get through the lead shielding. Okay, so you had radioactive fallout cover the whole planet. This model is 16 days. 16 days. Ignore that, Gunnarsson. Well, you don't have to ignore it. He's right. Move south of the equator for reactor 4 fuel pool goes dry. It was gone dry on March the 15th. Right? It blew up on March the 15th. So here's different studies, right? This was a model of the xenon. And they said about 1 million becquerels a square meter will land on the west coast. It was 450,000, I think it was. Yeah, 450,000 times above detection levels. So it was much higher than that model. That model there. Model from Vancouver was 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter, which is, right, you do an extrapolation of all the other isotopes when you see that. It should be around 31 times more iodine-129. There's 30 times more 133 and 10 times more 132. The 132, 133 ionizes and radiates thyroid glands of all species and humans, 9 times more effective than the 131, which is really effective. But it should be 31 times more iodine-129 with a 15 million year half-life, which this study was out of Ottawa, Canada. It was 220 million atoms sustained for many months per liter of rainfall that was showing up. So they would do extrapolations of plutonium, uranium, americium, ruthenium, strontiums, all the common ones, right? There's 1,000 ones that they would have to extrapolate from these numbers. But this kind of number, right, and then confirmation of the 131 at absurd numbers per liter, and the 220 atoms, and confirmation of 450,000 times of the xenon-133, which burns a hole through your lung. So the iodine-129 and 131, 132, 133s, there's so much of it per liter that all species thyroids and humans were saturated, where you're making radioactive hormones. And this is really bad news, right? So everybody was also poisoned in Canada because you lift food restrictions. So everybody got sick. But this happens in increments over decades before it plays out. But it will play out. It doesn't go away. These are absurd numbers. Levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle as the radiation is circling the globe. And that the radioactive fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison, which is why we got the poll is, why are you putting radiation in the people that is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison and claiming it's going to cure them? When there's only... Now, okay, so let's bring that together with a study I like to call proof that we're crazy. I got proof that we are crazy. Well, the industry is. Okay, all right. So, 3% efficiency of chemotherapy treatments on cancer. Hang on, I'll get there. The original conclusion is based on facts in 1985. This was validated in 2004 with another study. It showed 3% of the people would survive chemotherapy more than 5 years. And so they suggested you're better off not getting chemo or anything else with radiation than you are of radiation. It's estimated 2.3% in Australia, 2.1% in the United States survived. But you've got to put one more factor into that, is that 3% is considered misdiagnosis average. So they didn't even have cancer. They were the most likely ones to survive it. And it was discovered that human kidneys are at least 50 times less efficient than animal kidneys at removing, say, plutonium, which means you got to ask yourself an important question. Can you trust the animal studies? Right? So the animals are 50 times more efficient at removing it and excreting it than humans are. So let me show you one of those studies, because you might never come here again, and I'll regret not showing it to you. So this study was 144 beagle dogs and beagle puppies. Bone tumors, or tumors to the lung, skeleton, and liver, occurred beginning about 3 years after exposure, because they were inhaling anthropogenic man-made radiation. They weren't injected. The beagle dogs got a big nostril, right? So they like doing that. That's why I always say lock up your beagle dogs and puppies. Tumors of the lung, skeleton, and liver. 3 different tumors from the exposures began about 3 years after. The lung tumors in 46 dogs were the second most common cause of death, but bone tumors in 93 dogs were the most common cause of death, bone tumors. And liver tumors were found in 20 dogs, but the cause of death in only 2 dogs. It occurred later than tumors in the bones and the lungs. And tumors in these 3 organs often occurred in the same animal and were competing causes of deaths. So the finding in dogs suggests similar dose-related biological effects could be expected in humans accidentally exposed to it. But you got to take in the fact that it was discovered that human kidneys are 50 times less efficient than dogs, which means the humans are 50 times more susceptible to the same deaths than dogs are. Hey, we got James calling in. Hi, James. Hang on. We'll get you on the speakerphone without dropping you. You are live. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I just noticed that Kevin was in the chat. I was wondering if you could call Kevin tonight if there's any time left.
Sure.
I'll pay for the phone bill. I was just thinking it'd be great to hear
Absolutely.
Kevin talk.
I actually meant to do it last night. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. I'll let you go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll give Kevin a call. Yeah. Love you too, man. Let's give Kevin a call. That's a great idea. What's Kevin up to? Pick up the phone, Kevin. I got so many lights on me, but I still can't. He's got a. He's in the comment, is he? give him a minute and call him back or something. Yeah, radiation, chemo, 2 different treatments for sure. Hello?
Gonna catch a cold from that ice inside your soul. Kevin D. Blanche, the post-ignorance project.
I got his answer machine. We'll try him again. He's going to see my number. He's probably doing something else. Yeah, so the poll should have said radiation and chemo. I just put one in there. Yeah, they're both. Global local cancer risks after the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident. Global and local. Global. So, to finish this off, I've got to run through Fukushima radioactive fallout models. My apologies for anybody that gets lost in this stuff. That's normal, but I'm trying to keep you on track all the time. From the Baltic Sea from Fukushima, the Northern Hemisphere from Fukushima, global local cancers from Fukushima, Saudi Arabia, radiation fallout from Fukushima. And a lot of these were downplaying the actual significance of Fukushima, right? But the study that I showed you earlier of 20 million atoms per liter, 220 million atoms per liter, 129, airborne fission products in the high Arctic, behavior of radioactive cesium during incineration, which is 100% crimes against humanity because that's a dirty bomb, right? Of radioactivity, contaminated waste from decontamination activities, which is supposed to be stored on a site for millions of years. Instead, they burn it in incinerators all over Japan. Arrival of radionuclides released by the Fukushima accident to the Canary Islands. Decontamination of radioactivity from contaminated vessels from Fukushima. Again, this is a ludicrous study. You don't decontaminate your food, folks, under any circumstances. Reducing radiation exposure using commonly available objects. This was a paper where they said if you use different thickness of objects like books, corrugated cardboard, 2 layers of corrugated cardboard, magazines, polyurethane, foam boards, you can shield yourself from radiation in your home. Rather than get out of your home, you're in a nuclear wasteland. They actually produced a paper suggesting that people stay in the nuclear wasteland, which is going to be airborne too, right? And they said, well, the authors declare they have no conflict of interest. By not telling the people to get out of the nuclear wasteland, you got a conflict of interest, right? So you had radioactive fallout in Great Britain, radioactive fallout in Germany, in Korea, in Spain, in Russia, of course, in Romania, radioactive fallout in Australia, radioactive fallout in Italy, in France, radioactive fallout in Vietnam, British Columbia, Canada, who lied about it. Of course, many of these lied about the actual implications. We got Kevin back online. Hi, Kevin. How are you, sir?
What's going on, Dana?
Well, we're wondering if you give us an update to how's your last number of weeks going? Is there anything exciting you want to share with people going on right now, or?
Well, we're shattering heat records. I mean, the heat bubble that started in 2011, as I said, with this Fukushima pouring into the ocean, these full meltdowns, it's going to boil this ocean, cause a heat bubble. It's the greatest drought in 1,200 years. Pacific Beach, California today, where I grew up, and here in Ogden, Pacific Beach, on the beach, I'm talking right on the beach, average temperature 72 year-round. Today, the highest temperature ever recorded in Pacific Beach and Ocean Beach is 91.
Wow.
95 today. 95 today.
So it broke the record by 4.
Our average temperature here is 80. It was 104 here today for the 5th consecutive day. Redding, California is 117 right now.
Man.
And so this heat bubble over the western United States, how can people just chalk that up to Quincy? It started in 2011.
Yeah, you can chase it right back to 2011.
Yeah, that's what you can look it up. I'm the guy that named it in 2011. You can look it up. I named it the Great North American Western Freaking Drought. And you can look it up. It's the greatest drought in 1,200 years anywhere on Earth.
You killed the fungus and all the forest.
And, you know, these meltdowns pushing this energy into the Pacific Ocean, it boiled the ocean. Currents move left to right, jet stream moves over, and it just blows my mind.
Yeah, the oceans...
That's where the storms come from.
The storms we're seeing, they don't have infrastructure designed to take that kind of speeds. We're seeing...
Well, the storm...
Go ahead.
The weather's intense. It's crazy, but the bottom line is, in science, we call these outliners. So when you see this radical outline, and if you put it in symphony with the salmon started to clap in 2011. The Typhoon was wiped out in 2011, 2012. How can everybody just go on when all this evidence is the same year? So you run regressionary models and stats, you take the bias out. I don't care who you are, it points to 2011. Those are called the outline. That means something crazy changed in 2011. Well, hello? I mean, a meteor hit the ocean? I mean, it blows my mind, people I'm talking about.
It's horrifying.
It's just a heat bubble right over the western United States. These storms are pushing up over the top and coming down, you know, at the Mississippi, but the heat bubble right direct line with Fukushima. I mean, you could draw a perfectly good line with the storms and the ocean currents. And it just blows my mind how people are connecting the dots that everything changed in 2011, including longevity, including Einstein wrote a paper in 1951. It's a famous paper. I should dig it out. He wrote a paper that if we ever get a core meltdown and this genie ever gets out of the bottle, he said that it would cause viruses and mutations. And he says, unlike we ever seen, this would be an energy we've never seen, and they said that the human genome, so he was asked, well, will the human genome adapt to this? He says, yes, in 100 generations.
Which is a long way away.
Well, here we can't even connect the dots on the pandemic. You can't even talk about saying that Fukushima mutated something, which we know factually. This is the first time in human history that we had core meltdowns. We never had core meltdown at Chernobyl. We never had them at Maya. We never had them at Santa Suzanne. We never had them at Chalk River. This is the first time. So obviously, this is new.
And multiple ones
no
at the same time. Multiple ones too, right? And fuel pools.
Yeah, multiple ones. Not to mention the first time in human history that MOX fuel pools blew to smithereens. This is the first time MOX fuel has been released in mass into the biosphere.
Well, 1957 at Windscale.
Yeah, but not anything even near this low.
No, goodness, no. There was huge reactors, and that was mostly graphite in Britain, right?
Yeah. So there was more MOX fuel at Fukushima, Japan, than the two that have the more MOX, uranium-235, that after it's centrifuged and spun, weapons grade. That's what people don't realize. They don't use uranium out of the Earth-238 for a nuclear reactor. They have to centrifuge it and gas it and fission it. They do it in Canada, by the way, at Bruce. That's the biggest centrifuge process in the world, at Bruce. And they're in Illinois. They spin it, they gas it, and then they don't split the atom. The atoms collide, and free radicals complain. And that's what they put in a reactor, in a core. And so this is the first time that genie has ever been into the biosphere. I mean, nuclear bombs are a completely different fission event. The graphite explosion at Chernobyl, was 750,000 men entombed it. They put an egg, they put a core around it. Now, granted, it's leaching God knows what, and it's horrid. But Fukushima, they didn't do anything. And the jet stream is a direct line right on us where this heat bubble is. It's staggering to me. You know, I'm an AML leukemia survivor. I got sick in the fall of 2011. You know, the whole correlation, this story is so unbelievable, yet the whole world just turns the back on the couple anti-nukers that are out there, which is basically you and I. And we get nowhere. I mean, we get our brains bashed in daily.
Oh, man, it's brutal.
I don't even have a fucking car. I mean, it blows my mind how abused for telling the truth. You and I are the only ones that have documented it. We're it. I got news for you. There ain't nobody else on earth. I was talking to a guy in Vienna today. I says, the greatest PhD opportunity in human history is Fukushima. Name me one fucking person who took it. Name me one. He says, you? Durnford? I said, that's it. That's it. There's two guys on earth that took the greatest PhD opportunity. And did anybody come to our aid? Side? Promote us? Hell no. Nobody. It's staggering to me that all this evidence, is laying there, yet we're going to ignore it. I feel like I live in the Twilight Zone. I really feel like I live in some kind of abstract freak show.
I can't ignore it. I like yourself, right? I can't justify missing a show. I can't take a day off. I can't justify it.
The truth.
I can't justify it. Yeah. Sorry, Kevin. Go ahead.
You know the truth. You've been at this for so long. I know. I've been at this my whole. I know the truth, and we're so pushing so hard to say this is so. We're screaming to the top of our lungs. We're trying everything, and we know how important it is to the world for this to be recorded in history. So we just every day we're like, we gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, and we just like beating your head against a wall. It's devastated my life. There's lots of things I could do with my brain, and I have done a lot. And this has financially ruined me. But I know it's that important.
Right.
We're talking about, this is the greatest event in human history.
We got to die off.
The greatest crime, the cover-up.
Kevin, we got a die-off going on here for quite a few months now of birds. And so in April, when I went and looked at it along the coastline, it was 600 kilometers of dead and dying birds. They were all emaciated, and that was...
I remember.
Everybody acknowledged that. It's the same birds are dying today, but now they're calling it bird flu.
Yeah, well, there's a new report out today on a study on the shorebirds in California. The same thing. I've been reporting it for freaking years now. So there's a big report coming out today on all the candlesticks and shorebirds all starving to death in California right now. And that came out today. Hello, no shit. When the salmon numbers, we count them all, have collapsed. Some rivers are down 99%.
I was just going to ask you about the salmon.
We documented the tide pools. Look at the fucking tide pools. What do you people want? Heat bubble over the western United States. How about longevity headed south? That started freaking 2011, 2012. If people are just going to chalk this up to coincidence. This is epic what we're living in here in the western United States. This is some nasty shit. People have no clue what it's done out the west here. 16% of every square inch of real estate in Oregon, Colorado, freaking Utah, Nevada, and California has burned since 2015. 16% of every square inch. The radiation killed the fungus and the bacteria across North America right away. No doubt.
But there was bacteria deeper, but now that's gone too. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Remember when I was walking the coast of California in 2014, and I was 15, I was screaming and yelling about the trees done. All the pines were dead. Nobody listened to me. I was the first one reporting all the pines were done. And I was arguing with everybody, and pine trees hold radiation in their needles. That's how they stay green.
They do.
That's why when you throw them on your bonfire, they explode.
Like I got documentation of people being told not to collect pine needles for drink because they make tea out of it, tips, because they gathered up so much radiation at the tips. But that's why there's no spider webs in any of these trees too.
Well, I mean, there's videos of me and the biologist in California arguing about this, and he says, yeah. First they said it was big, and then he finally come around and says, no, you're right, Kevin. These are, it's radiation. And I said, is it radiation from Fukushima or is it radiation from the sun? And I said, so you can tell the difference? You can tell the difference, huh? I said, well, you're better than I. You can't tell the fucking difference. And why does this all acutely happen now? And so when remember my hypothesized that this was a new energy in the biosphere, and it was a vapor and it was a gas. And it was rising off of the suns, which I named plutonium. Do you remember when those first fires in 2014 in Northern Cal? There was 15 fires that started simultaneously over thousands of square miles. And everybody reported they thought it was a group of arsonists working. The fire departments, everybody thought it was arsonists. And then they realized that they all spontaneously ignited at the same time. Because it was a vapor, it was a gas, and the conditions got just exactly right, and they started to the atmosphere caught on fire. I mean, when we actually have the atmosphere catch on fire, it's new. That's never happened before. You know, it's this energy that's coming off these cores and this spent fuel. This energy that's coming off these cores is epic, and we don't know what it is. And it's in the ocean, and it's gotten in the trees. Like you said, killed the spiders, killed all the evidence is right there. And we're going to deny all this. We're just going to chalk it up to coincidence. You know, I'm so frustrated and so pissed off that, you know, we can't get anywhere. You know, they kettle us, attack us. It's heartbreaking, actually.
The industry doesn't have anybody to pick on is the problem, Kevin. They got you, basically, and me. And there's thousands of these firms.
Yeah,
there's thousands of firms. Dead. That's their job. And they don't have any opposition. So you got competing scumbags attacking you on a regular basis.
And think about the hiring of freaking teams of trolls Facebook page. You know, I tracked it down. I went to the FBI. I know who these people are. You know, and we had some good IQers, and we went to them. I said, the NEI and the DOE are actually hired. I'm in critical condition this whole time. I have AML de novo. I mean, and I'm like, that's a felony in all 50 states, yet they let YouTube sites, Facebook pages, 100%. They're still up there, some of them, most of them are down now, to physically and mentally and verbally slander you and I. What the fuck? Nobody on earth could get away with that. But they let them do it to us.
It was coordinated,
right. Yeah.
I had one guy out there, and he was getting actors or actresses and stuff like this, and they were claiming they knew me, they were my neighbor, they were my niece, and I got no idea who any of these people are.
Some of the shit that they've done to me, it blew your mind. I've had guns in my face twice in the early days. You know, I had people, I've been so attacked viciously, up, down, by family. You know, it's unbelievable what they've been able to get away with, these cowards. And they'll never do it to your face. You know, they did it. That happened twice. And it was these trolls out on the internet wounding up some useful idiots.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
It's absolutely, it's illegal. It's against the law.
So, Kevin, I don't mean to cut you off. Sorry, go ahead, bud.
Well, the bottom line is we keep fighting. I don't know what else to do. I really don't. Because, you know, we're out of money. I don't have any money. And so I struggle. They won't have public hearings anymore. I mean, it's so rare because they're on to me up in their face, exposing them. And, you know, I can't get to politicians like I used to. They're all freaking in hiding. And so
it's sacrilegious to criticize nuclear right now, and there's a big push to get nuclear to survive for a little while longer, and we've seen all kinds of people flip sides.
They put billions and trillions into it.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about the money. I mean, This governments have been pumping billions and trillions into this nuclear pork fairy tale bullshit since 1945. And Price-Anderson, the Congressional Act, they don't have to pay it back. Gates knows this. So does New Scale. All these guys know they start these fake companies, get a bunch of government pork.
Yeah.
You know, they go public, whatever, and they know they never have to pay it back. And they know they don't have
It's forgivable,
it.
for sure.
They're not any SMRs nowhere.
That's the norm, see? And they don't want to break that cycle.
Free money, big money. You know, Musk and Gates and all these creeps know it. How much freaking money they've got from government taxpayers in the name of freaking, you know, new nuclear technology. The likes of Bill Gates, the likes of freaking Musk, Bezos, these people. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
And Congress just keeps shoveling it to them.
They use the same examples in most of the stories. It's desperation. It's extremely coordinated, but it's 100% desperation. Unfortunately,
like
right?
you said,
Because
and all the media goes along with them. It's unbelievable how they've got the media academia. Fuck, I was a professor at the #1 school of business in the United States. You know, stood up to the nuclear industry. I mean, I'm talking #1 view of the testing. You know, I ran that whole program. I was the kingpin there. Look what they did to me. Stand up to these fuckers. They'll blackball you. They could have paid for my hospital bill, which was $1.8 million. They didn't. You know, so that's what we're up against.
Yeah,
I don't know what else we do.
I go through a lot of effort just to be independent, right? And
That's what you have to be.
If a big foundation did want to donate to me, it doesn't come with anything but just donate it, and you know, I'm not going to be tied to any organizations, because you start self-censoring yourself.
Because we won't bow to them.
Ain't kissing no rings.
Donators, they want something in exchange. They don't just give their money to you.
No, that's right.
That's why we don't get any.
Do you want to get inside the organization? That's how they typically approach it. They start donating big chunks, and
that's what they do.
Then they suggest they meet up, and
that's how they pull up the universities. State universities wouldn't take money when I was young.
Well,
for that very reason. Now they're all funded. Every building's named after the Gates Foundation, the freaking Musk Foundation, and you know, I mean, everyone, when they started taking their money, they didn't take their money until the late 70s and 1980s. I actually
had universities were contacting me by phone and email, but were showing up in my comments section and saying that people shouldn't trust me because I won't take their money or their equipment or their studies or their lecturers. And they were really upset. There was 3 universities in particular, but there was 5 or 6 approached me. They were going to give me all this money and all this equipment and all the studies I needed. And all. I said, why would I do that? Like
Guess who's back out in San Diego today on the news? Testing at San Onofre. Wait till you hear this one. Ken Bucketfuck Fusler and Wood Holes are testing the water next to San Onofre. It's on the fucking front page of the San Diego Chronicle, or San Diego Union today. You know, so you want to be a Ken Buser, then go the fuck ahead. But that's what happens. So, you know, they'll come to you and say, we'll give you this, so you do this. Then you have to sign over your PhD to them, and I refuse to do it. I burned my PhD right in front of God and everything. I'm not signing over to the J store. They own it. That's what Aaron Swartz was doing when he downloaded. People forget I was heavily involved with Anonymous. Heavily. And I lived in New York in those days, and I know exactly what Aaron Swartz was doing. And it was all about Fukushima. You know, and that phony piece of shit, freaking Glenn Greenwald, you know, he hands the chip. You know, he handed the chip to Laura. Laura is the daughter of the MIT Media Endowment. When Abbe came to the United States, he came to MIT Media Lab. Why would he go there? Well, that's where Aaron Swartz was downloading all the PhDs. You know, and I really think the guy that shot him, he probably knows all this. So why in the hell would a Japanese PM go to freaking MIT Media Lab? Which he did. And that was my group that priced him over there. You know, it blows my mind.
They're all, yeah. But when you look at the World Nuclear Engineering International, and World Nuclear News, these are 2 big lobbying groups, right?
They got all the money.
They'll write the articles and send it out to medias. Medias will publish it with their name on it, but reference back to these lobbying groups. That tells you the whole thing is controlled. Yeah.
You go back to the beginning of the Department of Energy. It wasn't called the Department of Energy. It was called the Department of Nuclear. And it was Jeff Bezos' grandfather, Geis, his mother's freaking dad, who was the original propagandist. And it was 100% put together. The Department of Energy was called the Department to promote nuclear reactors, nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs. It was started in 1945.
Atoms for peace, yeah.
You know how much money they still exist? You know how much money flows to that department via Congress a day?
No, I don't. No.
And they use it for PR firms. They use it for academy a day. They get billions a day. And so that's what we're up against. It's all about the money.
What we see.
We're fighting with
I cover
shooters, and they're fighting with bombs.
I cover the news cycle, folks, who are not familiar with this. And what Kevin's telling you is they're all connected worldwide. The whole nuclear industry is one great big sadistic family. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, they are.
They're symmetrically evil worldwide.
Edward Snowden said, I have the top clearance in the CIA. I got to the very top. But then I found out there was another top. Well, who's the other top? Global oligarchs. There you have it. And all the money's in nuclear, including Czar Putin, fucking Biden, fucking Trump, Bummer, Dummer, Gina McCarthy. They're all in the fucking club. Every one of them's in the fucking club. You know, and if you're not in the club, you don't get into power without being in that club.
Well, UN runs the planet, right? UN runs the planet. There are 195 militaries.
I protested the IAEA so many. I know Gross personally, by the way.
Raphael Grossi?
With him. I know Mono personally. You know, Mono died of cancer after going to Fukushima. We'll see what happens to Gross if he really did go to, you know, the Big Z, but I hardly doubt he ever even went there.
I looked at the documentation. He didn't go there.
Yeah, they're liars.
We got the documentation.
Well-documented liars. I was telling a guy today, you believe the IA? Just remember, did they tell you about Fukushima? No. Okay.
I ask Coast Guard that all the time when they jump me, right? Has anybody ever told you about Fukushima? Go to my website. I do it all the time, right? I've had Coast Guard. I've had Coast Guard come up to me at the wharf, recognize me, come over and shake my hand and give me a hug.
Yeah, I have plenty of those, but
I'm just saying, right? A lot of those guys do know the difference. And I got the name on the side.
All the time now. When I'm in California on the coast, it used to be laughing at me. Oh, they ain't laughing now. All those people that, you know, the Rangers, everybody that works the freaking coast, they come right up to me, Kevin, and they're all asking questions. Fukushima. I had a guy come up to me just right here in Ogden the other day, an old retired professor at UCLA, and he walked up to me and he says, "Oh my God, it's Kevin Lunch. Can't believe I run into you." He says, "Well, what do you think? How bad did Fukushima devastate it?" I said, "Oh, you want to talk about it now?" I told him to go fuck himself. Yeah. I said, "You're a UCLA professor for all those years. Get the fuck away from me."
Yeah, no kidding.
I punch you in the face.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's too late. It's too late for these guys. I mean, not for you and I. We've been on it from the beginning, and we were right. And I used to say, people used to laugh at me. And I said, okay, when it was, I guess they just thought it was fear porn. And then you had people like Alex Jones and all these people. You know how much money all these people, these shows you and I did, coast to coast, you know how much money they made off our backs, Dana?
Shocking, isn't it, boy?
Well, the forensic accountant was saying in 2013, that's when Alex Jones got on Fukushima, he was pulling in $800,000 a day, selling bunkers, selling freaking iodine tablets, selling all these things. Did they kick us any of it? Even rents. All those guys that freaking did it. They made a huge amount of money, Dana, and they didn't give us any. I didn't get any from them. I never got a fucking
No, we're the commodity, right? Yeah.
Well, they made a lot of money using us. My videos were all over. I did fucking 2011, 2012. I was on hundreds of radios. I look back how much money they were making, and they didn't send me 5 fucking cents. You know, so they can all kiss my ass. You know, so I tell you this, and I got to go, Dana. One last thing. I go back to that Tom Schultz Boston song. All I ever wanted was my peace of mind. And, you know, I got that. You've got that. What else? You know, that's all we got. But we have that. You know, that's enough for me. I'm good.
Appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you, my friend.
Okay, keep fighting.
Keep up the spirit, boy. We love it. It's awesome.
Oh, I will.
Everybody loves it, my friend. God bless.
Okay, thanks.
Call me anytime, Kevin, my friend. Yeah, okay now. It was Kevin Blanche. You can find Kevin at his site on YouTube for starters, and you'll find ways to donate on the top of his page, front page, and also under his videos. Or you can contact him if you're having problems at his site, and he'll tell you how to donate to him. Nuclear power plants brace in South Korea. France, half their fleet is shut down. And very vulnerable reactors. They're very corroded reactors. They're very brittle from poor design. Decades of bombardment by neutrons and X-rays and gamma shines and alpha. South Korea, so they're expecting, they're running some of their reactors at 30%, they claim. So they're saying 127 miles per hour with gusts of around 155. So the gust is generally, the consensus is 1/3, which puts it at over 170 anyway, up to 180 miles per hour gust. And they don't have infrastructures with building codes to survive that kind of wind, right? Like if you look at your local weather forecast, it's blowing 15, gusting to 25. Right? That's over half, or almost half, rather. You'll see it sometimes where it's blowing 30 kilometers and gusting 65. So it's double the speed. So when it gets up to 127 miles per hour, you will get gusts in 180 to 200 mile per hour ranges. As it moves closer to the coastline, instead of losing speed because it's coming in contact with land, it actually just sits there and full throttle and just grinds along the coastline. It doesn't move straight in and lose speed typically. This is a phenomenon we've been seeing in typhoons and cyclones and hurricanes. South Korea is going to build more reactors, and they're in a super typhoons. My apologies. I got two of me. And these storms are not your typical storm. They're 700, 800, 900 kilometers wide. Massive eyes. The Fukushima accident, residents of the village near the nuclear power plant were allowed to return home after 11 years. This is Kuma, which is 2 kilometers away from the reactor. It's been abandoned for 11 years. And you can have any of those apartments you want. They'll gladly move you in there. This is a drone shot, and you can see the reactors 2 kilometers away. This is a no-go zone. 85% of it is off limits. It's too radioactive to be there. So if you're playing baseball with your kid and the ball goes over the fence, you can't retrieve it. So they're going to talk about millisieverts, microsieverts, instead of atomic atoms floating around like invisible dust, say, right? So you don't talk about doses in microsieverts and millisieverts when it comes to radioactive fallout. You talk about it in atomic decays, like my Geiger counter screeching up there at a brutal clip. And 15% of the community is open, which means you're surrounded by airborne radiation. It's impossible that your land is not going to be assimilated. If you cleaned it up perfectly, 24 hours later, it's going to be completely radioactive. The only reason you want to move people back there is so statistically they can say people live there, therefore nuclear is not bad. And this policy is the nuclear industry setting these policies. And they have captured your government's key positions, and particularly your universities and your medias. So your universities are key because you take people from there and you appoint them, or you government agencies and big corporations are going to contact the deans and professors and ask them who's the students should be working for them. They're going to give them the pro-nuclear community. It's so evil at this stage that you can't deviate from that. It's completely captured. Your universities, and by proxy, your industry and your medias. It's a high level of radiation is recorded in more than 80% of the village. 80% of the village. They spelt it wrong there. Look at that. Maybe that's a different community. I couldn't find it when I looked it up. That doesn't mean nothing, of course. At first, it was forbidden to sell products grown in Fukushima, which it wasn't actually, right? They were actually giving farmers, there wasn't government agencies or universities testing it. They were giving farmers garbage Geiger counters and saying if it's 500 becquerels a kilogram, mix it with stuff that's not so radioactive till you get it below 500, and then you can ship it to market. The Geiger counter is only going to pick up very faint gammas, and it's not going to pick up the alphas, the betas, and the neutrons, and by proxy the X-rays from the emissions, which is the pulsing every second of energy of different emitters like alphas and neutrons and betas and gammas. They don't mix. They're almost at the speed of light to hit each other to change direction. That causes a brutal full body X-rays for all the species and humans every second. It's shocking, really. In 2019, the European Union eased import restrictions and lifted them in 2021 in September. UK lifted it a few weeks ago. Boris Johnson. These are actual monsters, folks. And food grown near Fukushima was served to the Olympics village at Tokyo 2021 games. There was no 2020 games. Hey, Liz Truss is now the UK's third woman prime minister. And she vehemently says there's nothing she won't do for the nuclear industry. And if she got to launch nuclear weapons, let me at it. Give me me cup of tea and we'll get it done. A German leader says the decision to phase out nuclear energy remains in place. Despite all the media claiming they're going to keep it open, Germany is adamant they're not staying open, the final 3 reactors. They've closed them all, 33 since Fukushima. They got 3 left to close on the last day of this year, December the 31st. Why France's nuclear industry faces uncertainty. France says they're going to build a whole bunch of reactors. Splitting of the atom. And once you take it out of the reactor core and put it in the fuel pool, it's still splitting the atoms for 1 million homes. And you collect decades of reactor cores like that, put them in fuel pools, they're all splitting atoms each day for millions of homes into the environment where they start pulsing energy every second. This has been going on for almost 3/4 of a century, released into the environment. The more you produce, the more you radiate the entire planet every day with new perpetual disease factories. These are perpetual disease factories. Splitting up the atom. They say nuclear reactors is a source of pride for France. Yeah, with over half the reactors offline from corrosion. It's false pride at best. Today, the nuclear energy earns the country $3 billion US per year in electricity exports. So just sell marijuana, you make a lot more instead of disease factories. An especially hot and dry summer has decimated the rivers they're dependent upon for cooling and reduced them down to less than half the fleet. Also because of corrosion, right? The CERN, which these are huge friggin' energy sucking machines, by the way. They use the same as about 1/3 of Geneva, which is 500,000 people worth of energy each day. So they're going to idle her down and shut her off for a while. 17 miles of superconducting magnets that you got to keep cool even when it's not running to minus 465 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, even when the beams are turned off. So Geneva, has a population of 500,000. It consumes 1/3 as much as Geneva does each day. The industry is disgusting, isn't it? Nuclear industry. It's a $4.4 billion and has sucked up all the precious metals on the planet to be used for something to destroy the future anyway. Nuclear waste eating technology is a money pit. First off, this is not nuclear waste eating technology. This is mixed oxide fuel. This is really interesting. This is super important. Regarding nuclear waste technology in Canada, the idea is to extract plutonium from used nuclear fuel and reuse it as new fuel in a small modular reactor. That doesn't exist, by the way. The pyro process has been tried only in one place before, the Degenerate, Idaho National Laboratory in the U.S., which sits on one of the biggest freshwater aquifers in the U.S., where they've spent over $50 million trying to retrieve some of the nuclear waste that has found its way down there from nuclear accidents, nuclear meltdowns, where it's been a financial fiasco. At the Idaho lab, the cost of extracting plutonium from spent fuel went from a prediction of $18,000 per kilogram. It's pretty cheap, if it was that cheap, because you only need a couple of kilograms to blow up a city. And they're using it for fuel, which means you're going to liberate it into the environment where it's going to be with a 24,000 year life, 240,000 year half-life. There's 10 of them. To an average of $50,000 per kilogram 2020 and $80,000 per kilogram in the past since 2020. Costs for extraction and in-term storage have also continued to escalate. At that rate, it costs billions of dollars just to prepare fuel for a single small modular reactors. And they're going to produce 35 times more intermediate level waste, 30 times more high level waste, and 5 times more fuel rods, which is super high level waste because they're so inefficient. There's no economy of scale taken into consideration. One big question for us is the New Brunswick Canada, who's going to be feeding the money pit? And I encourage everyone interested in this topic to read the peer-reviewed research instead of the nuclear industry sales and promotional materials. Well said. Hear, hear. Hear, 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 hear. Detroit News. Cook nuclear reactor powers up 1 week after shutdown. There's no checks and balances. They'll never tell you the actual facts because they consider it a secret. Terrorists might take it and use it against us, Dana. Oh, I thought you guys were the terrorists. Weeks after it automatically shut down to a failure in the coolant pump motor. Okay, so now they're saying the motor, failure in the motor. Okay. It sits right alongside it, by the way, Lake Michigan, which is combined, this is the biggest freshwater lakes on the planet, I think, combined. They got multiple reactors on this thing, so now it's contaminated for millenniums. Democrats, environmentalists warm up the nuclear power for quicker transition. Diocolo in Switzerland, or Finland rather, nuclear plant, took 5 years to make the site usable and 17 years to build a reactor. And you're going to call that a quick transition, are you? The industry really is, they're not stupid, but they seem, the idea is to manipulate the population. That's the whole idea of everything that we cover in these 24-hour news cycle type educational shows. Democrats, environmentalists warm up the nuclear power for quicker. These are crazies. So they're claiming that nuclear power is gaining acceptance among the parties and activists as a clean alternative. This is typically environmental progress, Michael Schellenberg's narrative, right? Which is a nuclear lobbyist. We're quite familiar with this narrative. Proponents argue the carbon-free source is clean. They're so up on their souls now. They can't even bother to dress it up anymore. Given a leg up over wind and solar, which are intermittent and hamstrung by limited battery storage capabilities. Why would you use batteries to power a city? Who's actually that stupid they thought that idea up? Well, that idea is meant to drive the average person away from the conversation. They have what they call water batteries, where you have two reservoirs, you pump water up to the top one. These are no fish or nothing. These are just man-made reservoirs. And when you got extra energy, you pump water uphill. When the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining, you release the water into the lower reservoir. And by proxy, you should be using compressed air storage at the same time, which is where you dig mine shafts and just compress air down into the mine shaft at about 120 psi. And so you have a backup for the backup storage, right? And so renewables would have no problem you can certainly just replace everything that way. But ideally, you would just drill down and then use whatever technology you needed to tap into geothermal directly under gas, oil, coal, and nuclear plants and replace the expendables with geothermal. But ultimately, right, that should be the better idea. Geothermal and tidal energy are guaranteed 24 hours a day. So if you have that combination, Australia would be perfect. If you have that combination, you don't need storage. But if you do, you would back up geothermal and tidal energy, wind and solar, back it up with water batteries and compressed air storage. And you don't need any of the stupid, not stupid, but, they'd serve their purpose, commodities, energy industry anymore. Why wouldn't you do something like that? And so they'll do everything they can to scuttle that. They don't want solutions. So when they talk about battery storage capacities, that means they hate your guts. That means they despise you. That's virtue signaling that they have utter contempt for you. These are such awesome people. They're protesting the Canadian Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is the industry itself, putting nuclear waste in prime farmland and where there's 70-something thousand freshwater ponds. Right in all these communities. The idea is they know the resistance is going to show up and they're not going to put it there unless there's consent. And so they'll sit there for 5 or 10 years and then they'll move somewhere else to do the exact same thing for 5 or 10 years. They'll move somewhere else. This is what they've been doing for 20 years already, right? And the idea is to never come up with a solution. The idea is to put it wherever the most controversy is going to be, and that way let them fight about it for a few decades with no intentions of actually putting it there. Because it's all still splitting the atom, the high-level waste. That's what's really going on. That's the only thing that actually adds up, right? So these fine folks are on day 3, I think, or something. Don't quote me. So they walked for several days last week, and now they're going to start to walk again. Left Inglis late last week after a couple of days staying in Dresden. They're now off to Suak's Lookout. And they started their marathon walk at the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's. This is creepy as shit, where the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is the industry itself, actually put an office in one of those little communities to cause the conflict on purpose. And then they give millions of dollars to certain organizations in the community with no limitation on what they can spend it on. To cause the conflict, see? It's really something. And they hire a lot of the local water pullers and construction companies and trucking companies to haul material for the so-called test wells and that. And so they're making coin, right? They're making money. And so they're going to be pro-scumbag because the money's rolling in. But the native communities are looking at the big picture, which is, thank goodness, there's somebody doing it. And they come to the right conclusion. This is insidiously evil. And each year they go out and raise attention peacefully. Now, if I went there and done that, there'd be a half a dozen cops grab me, throw me in a truck, and get me out of there before someone got my picture. But because these people are passive and don't understand the nuances, that doesn't matter, of course. Then the industry doesn't feel threatened by them, right? Cook nuclear plant returned to service after shutdown. We covered that. Morocco's partner to boost Africa's nuclear safety. Africa has one reactor site. It's on fault lines. It's decrepit and brittle. And they just gave it an extension, I do believe. Aims to boost the continent's capacity to use nuclear reactors for genocide, medical, and research purposes, which is about evil as it gets. Participating in joint program are 32 representatives from 13 African countries. So these people are very desperate. So there's a lot of conflict and stories about the Ukraine-Russian conflict, the plant. So they allegedly cut off, there was 4, because each nuclear power plant needs 2 external cold oil and gas plants to supply power to them. They can't run on their own electricity, despite the lies you'll see sometimes where trolls will claim they can. They actually can't. They have 2 full-size, you would see in a city, cold oil or gas plants to run their beloved carbon-free, clean nuclear power plants, which is ludicrous to suggest it. All nuclear power plants are still, their fuel, which is on site, is splitting the atoms. That's hemorrhaging into the environment. The typical nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. And this way they can murder you in your homes and supermarkets, and you paid for it. Nuclear facility robotic dogs. Reinvented the dog to make nuclear plants safer. You don't have them at coal plants, oil plants, or gas plants, or solar plants, or wind plants, or geothermal. You only got them at stupid nuclear. They don't need robotic dogs. Anywhere where it's a lethal dose, send in a nuclear scientist. They're completely immune to it, I heard. It takes an energy crisis for political elites to wake up to nuclear. Scumbag. This guy is a real scumbag. Whiz for atoms. Boris Johnson went out with a boosterish bang in Essex last week with apologies to Nigel as he urged us to go nuclear and go large. Listen, this fella knows nothing about nuclear. The nuclear industry and the lobbyists tell him what to say, and he goes out and shakes a hand and says it. These are not geniuses. They don't quit being prime ministers and presidents and start up some company and come out with all kinds of inventions, okay? They go disappear. And they're surrounded by security so that people don't find out the truth. France announced 14 new atomic power stations. Half their fleet is offline. They don't even have water to run the fleet that they got properly. And they're going to build more, dependent upon a projection of even worse droughts each year forever. Japan is reactivating 7 nuclear plants. They got to get permission from the locals who are not going to give them permission. Who, in every single case, where everybody in the community throws $100 into the kit and they hire a whole bunch of lawyers and they tie up the nuclear industry for a decade to the point where the place can no longer be open. That's what's going on in Japan. And just these handful of plants doesn't equate to a nuclear renaissance. It doesn't have any of those attributes whatsoever. Iran demands closure of the International Atomic Energy Agency's probe for sustainable nuclear deal. Well, this is about Israel, right? And this is why we got high inflation of gas, by the way, is because Israel won't let Iran have a deal, therefore Iran won't sell oil. If Iran sells oil, it replaces Russia, the prices come flying back down. Which surprised me down here because the gas just dropped down a few days back to $1.66. So I went and filled up jerry cans multiple times a day and filled the boat up. I filled up 2 tanks and I have 2 6-gallon jerry cans also filled up. And so the tanks are 12.5 gallons each. And then I filled up the truck also, topped it up. It was pretty low because it burns a lot of gas pulling the boat, the big trailers, or even the other trailer for that matter. So I'm not sure what the number is, 30-something gallons I got for the boat. And we got 3 12.5-gallon tanks, right? We filled up 2 of them. One of them's, the very back one is still empty. I'm leaving that on purpose because that's an extra 120 pounds on the very rear end. It's not necessary because I'm not going for 400 kilometers up the coastline, right? But I do have jerry cans, and the jerry cans also act as counterweights on the boat. So you can position them in different places to keep the boat level when appropriate. And that was $310 we blew on gas today. And we raised where were to here? Michael Schell last week, I forgot to mention, sent us 40. He called in last Thursday, remember that? Colette donated 100 tonight. Thank you, Colette. You're so awesome, honey. And Stephen Young donated 50 today. And thank you, Stephen. And that's super appreciated, my friend. We're expecting parts for the motor to show up tomorrow. And officially, birds are still dying. And there's man-o'-wars also washing up on the beaches on the other side. That's where we like to head to. Officially, summer just ended by the looks of it. Significant change in temperatures and sea state is expected to change really soon. So we're going to have to go at it before it gets too stormy, right? And which is fine. I'm totally thrilled. We also got to get out to Baccaloo, where there should be 3.3 million breeding pairs of storm petros. And, of course, they're nocturnal, which means I got to get out there in the dark, which always freaks me out, because you're in the open Atlantic again, right? And that's fine. And then we're hoping to go across the province looking for spiders and other species, but particularly spiders. And I got to pull that off at all costs. We got to pull that off, because if we don't, that'll be a mistake, right? And we need that to be able to assert whether or not the spiders came back, right? We need to quantify the last couple of years by repeating it again this year, because that's significant implications if the spiders are still missing. And I can almost guarantee the spiders are missing, but we can't say that. We got to go verify it, right? We got to go make sure. And there's 2 possibilities that we can do there. Is we can, I guess, what I should do, and will do rather, is we'll do the quad and the trailer and equipment and the camps, camping gear and everything else. And because we got that 4 Seasons tent right now, right? So even if the weather gets horrible, we're able to handle it. That's a huge deal. And then in a month's time, shoot across on the bike, on the yellow bike, right, on the BMW, in a 3 or 4 day period, and come back. And that way we'll check for species along the way, but we'll check all the ponds on the way through. And we'll take samples, ideally, and then go through them and catalog it and take pictures of each sample of any species that are in the samples. And if we can pull that off this year, that'll be the species don't have anybody fighting for them, right? There's just this small crew of us that have taken up this task. And it's a very humble, every facet of what we're doing is really humble. But if we can pull it off, we make all the universities look like scum. Which is not very hard to do, unfortunately. Okay, so we're going to call it a night, I guess, right here. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. And there's not very many people showing up on my numbers, but people are still watching it. Just YouTube has censored the numbers. I'm not going to do it again tonight to show you what's really going on, but it's unequivocal. Brutal censorship on my videos. It's brutal. It's better to make a playlist than it is to try to give me a thumbs up. We'll take it. You can try. I think last night and all the way up tonight was a total of 10 extra thumbs up from when the video ended, which is 4 more than I got over 3 days from Thursday's video, right? Look, I'm not running a music blog where you come here, I don't like that artist, I'm going away. I'm running a nuclear blog. And so if you're here watching this stuff, you're a hardcore, and you don't care, you're not here because of a certain story is what I'm saying, right? You're here because of a topic. It's completely different. And so the people that follow this stuff and participate in this knowledge are not they're not here to find out about a certain story, right? It's nuclear itself. And so there's not going to be a mad fluctuation of people on these types of videos. But neither is it going to be a super low number, because nobody's ever ran a nuclear educational program in history. And in particular with this one, because I'm honest, I have the extra onus that I'm not allowed to make a Freudian slip. That's quite hard to do, not to make a little slip. And so that's why I'm so thoughtful in the words, my connotations. It's because it's an educational program, and it's meant to appeal to everybody of equal education. It doesn't matter. If you follow this for a few days, you will understand these nuances quite well. Right? If you really wanted to go down the rabbit hole on nuclear, this is the major venue for that, right? Because it's such a visual, I bring such a visual amount of documentation. It's an absurd amount for so many years that it's not a subject that you can rush, right? You got to be methodical about any discrepancies. You got to try to catch it and methodically make sure there's no way to misinterpret the documentation. So we had a poll tonight. I provide the documentation. It's unassailable. Should evil, deadly chemotherapy be banned from hospitals and radiation use worldwide? So there's two facets. There's many other facets. I'm just encompassing it all into the chemo, and I think anybody that's being actually honest knows that I'm not ignoring different types of radiation, because there's radiation beams, not just radiation therapy, as we showed you about the lead vest, right, for instance. But chemo, injecting it directly into you, I showed you the studies at the beginning of the harm from just inhaling radioactive fallout. Imagine injecting doses into you where you need $1 million room that's lead lined to protect the people in the hallway. That's exceptional. These are exceptional doses we're talking about. Some people are getting many sieverts doses. These are significant more than radioactive fallout typically. And the nurses and doctors become desensitized quite quickly to that reality, and they're no longer able to question it. And I get that, right? That's it for everybody. Pretty burnt out, actually. Which is okay. That's the way it's supposed to be after a hard day gathering up all kinds of documentation. Spending hours trying to articulate it. That's just the way it rolls, right? We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Now, tomorrow, if the partial shows up, there will be a video, whatever day, whether it's tomorrow or the next day. That boat should go in the water the same day to make sure the throttle is actually working to get that out of the way, right? As quick as I can. So I'll probably shoot a short video while I'm out there and post it right away. Because the industry hates the idea of me back on the water, trust me. They just hate that. And so the poll, for the last time, I'm going to close it. And we got spammed a little bit. No, 8% said no. That was spammers. Because when I provided the documentation at the beginning, if someone wants to disagree with it, they're disagreeing with the documentation. It's no good to say, well, I had chemo and I was okay. Yeah, well, you probably didn't have cancer in the first place. That's what the evidence suggests. You can't deny all the studies. It's not fair to deny all the studies. It's not even reasonable. I'm going to end that poll, or I'll just keep going. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. I'm going to come in and read the comments after. Hope everybody had a great day today on this Labor Day weekend with their loved ones, hopefully, and friends and families. There's links in the bottom of the description. The very last two links are directly to PayPal, to Dana Durnford, and the other one is to my website where you can donate with just about any kind of card worldwide. There's a whole list, and there's not all of them, but there's a whole list of different cards worldwide you can use to donate, including your favorite ways, apparently. And I got my fingers crossed. I got almost everything ready for the boat. Tomorrow I got to do a little bit of wiring. And so I got the gear for all that. I got to check the tires. And everything else is a go. If the part shows up tomorrow or the next day, whatever, which it will. The weather holds out. We're going out and look for birds, and dead birds, unfortunately, because that's what we got going on down here right now. We want to see ourselves if the birds are emaciated, because research shows that it is. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Take care, folks. Thank you again.
Feuer trunken himmlische dein Heiligtum, deine Zauber
Yeah, good night, everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night.